I am Mayor Tashara Jones. I use the she, her pronouns, and it is an absolute pleasure to be with you today. In the mid-1990s, a circuit clerk discovered hundreds of files lost in a basement. These files were the hidden stories of hundreds of enslaved Black people who went to our courts to sue for their freedom in the 57 years before the Civil War. They had the audacity to hope that a white judge and white male jurors would listen to their proof that under the law, they were entitled to freedom. St. Louis courts were unique in the nation by allowing Black people held as slaves to sue the white people who enslaved them. More than 100 people won their freedom through such lawsuits. These were the freedom suits. The most famous freedom suit originated in the St. Louis Circuit Court system when Dred Scott and his wife Harriet sued for their freedom. But most people only remember how the Dred Scott case ended at the Supreme Court, and not that it started here in St. Louis. Cities in the South, like Selma, have rightfully earned their place in civil rights history. But I would argue that St. Louis deserves a similar spot in the pantheon. St. Louis has quietly led on civil rights for centuries, all the way from our founding in the 1800s to present day. From the freedom suits to the Black Lives Matter movement, our city possesses fights for justice even in the face of overwhelming opposition. With this monument, we stake our claim, our city's claim, in the long struggle for civil rights in this country. We celebrate those courageous individuals who dared to dream of freedom, along with their lawyers and judges who did what most thought was not possible. I am truly honored to break ground today as the first Black woman elected to be the mayor of the city of St. Louis. I'm honored to break ground on this memorial honoring the tenacity and the courage of Black Missourians who came before me, blocks away from the very spot where our ancestors, in the face of slavery's atrocities, sued for their freedom. Thanks to the vision of Judge David C. Mason, this memorial will be an undeniable beacon recognizing the resistance of enslaved people. We break ground today for an incredible work of public art and a powerful statement of our commitment to equal justice to all who seek it. And now, I'd like to introduce one of the many individuals who has worked tirelessly for seven years to this day to bring us to this day, Judge David C. Mason, Circuit Judge.
I've even seen my wife work as a video producer who's been documenting a lot of this, my son who's with the construction crew who has been helping and doing things as a student intern. It's kind of become a family affair for the Mason family. And I want to thank my wife and my son for joining me. I know although Will's getting paid for it, but still, you know. The mayor is correct, and I'm glad that she said it and proclaimed it as the mayor, that this is a civil rights city. This is not a police brutality city. It is a civil rights city. And there have been so many people. I want to particularly lift up, since we just lost her, Betty Thompson, who taught me, and many like me, that when you are in positions of authority and you're Black, you have to think about that. And it was thinking about that that made me realize that some of the unsung heroes of this city were the men and women who filed suit and filed the freedom suits and fought for their freedom. Likewise, the judges who protected them and the juries who in so many cases granted them their freedom. And Speaking of judges, I do want to thank my colleagues. The Circuit Court en banc, that means all of us, of the City of St. Louis, the 22nd Circuit, voted unanimously to establish this memorial about 7 years ago. And they listened to me meeting after meeting after meeting after I kept talking about every little thing that's coming, and they never lost hope. They never said we need to stop worrying about this. They said, you know, okay, Mason, we think you got it, you keep working. And that tell me about it, they're incredible. They're incredible. And this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the support of my colleagues on the Circuit Court. And then the incredible lawyers who came and joined the steering committee, Paul, Leanne, I don't know if Tom Neal is running around, and of course, one of our former mayors here, Francis Slay. And I want to say the mayors, up until the present, it didn't take but a second for them to realize that they had to bring their power, influence, and gravitas to this project, each and every one of them. And that says a lot about the kind of people that this city has been electing as its mayor over the years. And I want to thank them as well. It is my hope that this monument will always stand for the judges and lawyers and citizens who come to serve as jurors as a reminder that when they walk into this building and begin to exercise their respective power in the judiciary, that they know that that power must be exercised without consideration for the station in life of any of the people who come before them. That these doors are open to all with a legitimate claim, and fairness and justice and equality is what's going to happen inside that building. As many of you know, I could talk a long time about this. There are people wondering, can Mason limit himself to 3 minutes? Well, I believe I can. And I want to introduce now one of my colleagues, my boss in a way. He is the presiding judge of our circuit. And I remember him as a young judge, and I could tell you he was always laser focused in trying to know what he was doing, laser focused in being professional, and always thinking about how the management of this court can work best for the people. So, my presiding judge of 22nd Circuit, Presiding Judge Michael Stelzer.
Say something about July 28th?
Oh, I was reminded, why did we pick this day? This is the day that the 14th Amendment was generally accepted as being the ratified day. And the 14th Amendment is the day that proclaimed all of us as citizens. And that, of course, undid the horror of the Dred Scott decision. Thank you for reminding me, Ms. Green.
Thank you, Judge Mason. Okay. Thank you very much, Judge Mason. It's nice for one of the 31 judges here to refer to me as their boss. So it's a position that I have. I'm a volunteer, so thank you very much, Dave. On behalf of the judges that are here, I want to welcome everyone to the groundbreaking for the Freedom Seuss Memorial. I want to especially thank Mayor Jones for being here, our former mayors, Krewson and Slay, for being here, all the members of the judiciary who are here. This is obviously a big moment for our court. In particular, I want to thank Judge Mason, Mr. Vanker, and all the members of the committee. The amount of effort that they have put into this is unbelievable. I think Dave has probably been on the court en banc agenda more than anybody in the history of this circuit, but he stuck with it. He never gave up, and he kept pushing the ball forward, so I really want to give him a big round of applause for all the help that he did on this. And he is correct that this was unanimously supported by the court, and if you've ever been to any of our court en banc meetings, unanimous votes are hard to come by. So I think Dave really did a good job on this, and everybody got behind it. You know, I think everybody knows, as some of the previous speakers have pointed out, if you mention Dred Scott, obviously everybody would understand what that case is, what it meant to this city, to the legal system, to our nation as a whole. But what is not as well known or heard of are these hundreds of other lawsuits that were filed by these individuals seeking their freedom in our courthouse. You know, many of them were successful. Unfortunately, many of them were not. It was an imperfect time, and the verdicts, I'm sure, were imperfect, to put it mildly. I would say this, in thinking about what I was going to say today, I don't know if you could come up with another group of cases that have been filed in our circuit in the 200 years that the city of St. Louis has had a circuit court that had more impact, not just on the individuals, but I think on the legal system and our culture and our society as a whole. I think what you have to remember is that these individuals brought these lawsuits. They did not seek monetary gain. They did not seek to resolve some real estate dispute or some property dispute. They sought that most basic right, which was their individual freedom. And again, as pointed out by some of the previous speakers, they brought these cases in front of a jury which, quite frankly, was not a jury of their peers. And many times that jury did the right thing, but unfortunately, many times they did not. I'll say this part of our history I think is fascinating. If I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I've read a few books on this, it has been chronicled by articles in journals. There are several books that have been written about the history of these cases. One I want to touch on briefly. The name of the book is 57 Years. The author is the late Tony Sestrick, Anthony Sestrick, who was a member of the bar here in St. Louis. I had the pleasure of having him practice in front of me as a young judge. Just a wonderful person. He was a lifelong resident of the city. He did a tremendous amount of research and chronicled some of the major freedom lawsuits that were filed in this 57-year period. And it's interesting, as Judge Mason pointed out, you know, some of the judges on these cases would actually enter orders of protection in favor of the slaves, that their owners could not take any sort of retaliatory action against them while these lawsuits were pending. He also notes that the judges in these cases instructed these juries that they must return a verdict of freedom if the evidence supports it. I think even then there was an idea that, you know, juries sometimes didn't always follow the instructions that the court gave them. And I think that these judges were very fair in how they handled these. You know, Dave and I discussed a little bit about this yesterday, about, you know, what was I going to say and, you know, what should I say? And one of the points that he made, and I'm giving him credit for this, is that, you know, how are these cases important to our court system? I think he's touched on it, and I'll restate it. These cases show the importance of the judiciary and the role that they have in hearing cases in an impartial manner. That is I think the lesson to be learned from these cases. We didn't always get the outcome that we probably should have, and that's still true today in cases. But we come at it from an impartial platform, and we rule on cases based on what the law and the facts tell us to do. We don't always get it right. God knows I've been reversed enough. But that is the system that we have. So I guess in concluding my remarks, I would just encourage you, if you haven't read some of the articles and the books that have been printed out there on this topic, I found it fascinating. The first one I read was probably 4 or 5 years ago when we first started talking about that, and I've read several since then. So I would just encourage you to do that if you haven't already. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Adolphus Pruitt. He is currently the president of the St. Louis City NAACP chapter. He is previously the first vice president of the NAACP, the Missouri State Conference. He has served on numerous committees and civic organizations, including the Inner City Housing Development Corporation and the St. Louis Public Library Centennial Commission. So, Mr. Adolphus Pruitt.
Jared, you feeling good, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I will be there.
How would I do this? So, rather as a defendant or plaintiff. When you went before the courts, you expected to get fairness, equity, and justice. And the unique thing about why we're here today, this Freedom Suit Memorial will stand as a reminder, and in most cases as a tribute to a time in history, that snapshot in time in St. Louis where fairness, equity, and justice was possible for the enslaved. But in some cases, that period of time is more of a snapshot as relates to how our opinion sometimes today is of the courts at present. But to be fair about it, back then, the color line was fairly clear and definable. Black versus white, bondage versus freedom, property versus humanity. It's this unique thing about property, at least the definition, is this bundle of rights that owners of property had back then. The right to possess, to use, to derive profits from, and to dispose of. And the Freedom Suit sort of answered two questions as relates to that, in my estimation. One is, what are the property rights that I retain for my body? And two, what property rights do I retain for the body of others? And unfortunately, even today, that question, that argument is still being meted out in the courts. A good example would be Roe versus Wade. Some would even say this issue of assisted suicide. And the young people would say that it's these matters involving Britney Spears. You know, racism and social inequities have become pervasive in contemporary societies. Sometimes they manifest in hostile acts towards what you consider outgroups based on race, sex, religion, sometimes even what nation, what country you're from. I think we're going to reach a point where those folks who really take a good hard look and examine the history of the Freedom Suits and what they were able to accomplish here in this city at that, and let's be clear, that is only a snapshot in time. It's a very small snapshot compared to the freedom and inequities that African Americans are suffering even still here today. But they will learn that it is possible to believe in our judiciary, believe in our court system overall, and more than anything, believe in the members of the bar. There's a very special, unique group of individuals. I can't say it enough. We can talk about the folk being impacted. We can talk about everything as relates to this, but at the end of the day, it was the members of the bar who stood up and made sure that that notion of fairness, equity, and justice was meted out, at least during that period of time and still today. Now I get to have a little fun because I get to introduce somebody that deserves a significant amount of recognition, because have you ever heard the saying about steering cats or herding cats? Well, I never would have thought a lawyer would be able to do that. But as the chairman of the Freedom Suits Memorial Steering Committee, Paul Vanker did just that. Just to talk about him and who he is as a person quickly, let me say that he came, I'm gonna have some fun. He came from humble beginnings, but they didn't start till he got to law school. That's when it all started. And at the time, he also, upon graduation, he clerked for when I passed Chief Justice of the Missouri Supreme Court. He's had a stellar career, and exclusively in most cases is what I love about him is that the area of practice, employment discrimination, wrongful discharge, non-compete covenants, medical malpractice, long-term care, home health care, environmental claims for cleanup of hazardous materials, and so forth and so on. This is a man who cared about people. And I can't think of a better person to be the one to oh, by the way, he has this thing about the appellate court. He loves going in front of them and practicing. I don't know why he loves the appellate court so much. Paul, they're not the greatest group of people. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. It's slip of the tongue. But without any further ado, Attorney Paul N. Vanker.
You're too kind. You're too kind. Good afternoon. It's my honor and privilege to help Judge Mason by serving as the chair of the Freedom Suits Memorial Steering Committee. Judge Mason is both a member and the convener of that committee. He chose an array of people he knew would be good stewards of this inspiring project and who would see it through to the end. I am proud of all the hard work done by all the steering committee members. However, all our good intentions are no substitute for the financial support and generosity of the donors needed for this important project. We want this to be a community-supported memorial and welcome all contributions. This has proven to be true of our 112 donors thus far. The dollar amounts range from $25 to $100,000. We have been so fortunate to have 34 of our donors give at least $5,000. Every dollar helps. I want to stress that. The smallest contributions are still very welcome, but we must recognize those who have been able and willing to support the memorial with great generosity. We were fortunate to have the early support of the legal community, which started back in 2019 as we started fundraising. Among the first was the Mound City Bar Association, whose early generous donation helped us gain momentum. Truly a significant effort there. Later, the leaders of 4 law firms, Roman Wooler of Thompson Coburn, Marcy Graham of Gray, Ritter & Graham, Ed Dowd of Dowd Bennett, Bob Tomaso of Hush Blackwell, all led their respective firms to give generous donations as well. And together, those 4 firms have contributed a pretty large percentage of what we've gotten up to now. Below them is another tier of lawyers and law firms who've made generous contributions. I can't name them all now, but they include Eric Holland, Baker Sturkey, Cape Sokol, Dowd & Dowd, Tuith Keeney Cooper, Spencer Fain, the Powell Law Firm, Hepler Broom, Lowenstein Sandler, and Lewis Rice. Other smaller donors are still important, and they all know that they are part of something larger than life, which will be truly meaningful to St. Louis and to our nation. We have recently begun approaching potential corporate donors. The Centene Charitable Foundation's $100,000 matching donation is far and away the largest gift. We are fortunate to have with us today Keith Williamson, who is the president of that foundation, and thank him again for this generous gift. Ameren is also donating a generous gift. We are fortunate also to have Marty Lyons, Patrick Brown with us here today. Sarah Kramer may come later, so thank you, Mr. Lyons. We appreciate it. And we are optimistic that other corporate citizens committed to St. Louis, the St. Louis community, will follow the generous examples of Centene and Ameren. So you're all here. It's July 28th, which is significant, as it's already been pointed out, but it's a hot one. It could be hotter, right? So why should anybody be giving to the Freedom Suits Memorial? Here's why. To honor, to educate, and to bring change. This memorial will be a monument of public art that will certainly have a national stature for its message about the beginning of the end of the enslavement of blacks in America. It will become a standard field trip of both grade school and high school students to see and start discussions about this most important chapter in American history and much more. And to help, we don't just have the sculpture in this, to help the sculpture, to bring it alive, will be a website-based virtual learning center that will contain historical facts curated at a history museum level. We will have articles by scholars and historians about these suits and what they led to. And our hope is that this becomes a go-to source for information about the freedom suits and well beyond that. It's true, we've raised almost $500,000, which I gotta tell you is pretty heartening for me as the chair of the steering committee. The year we've all had, and really we had this much focus on this project is astounding. And so I'm so elated about that. But the goal is $1 million, and I think we really need to keep pushing, and hopefully we'll be able to get other donors to match what's been given up to now. Those additional dollars will allow us to complete the entire Freedom Plaza, which, by the way, most of you are either standing or sitting on, because it's going to be right there, dead center, in between these sidewalks that you're kind of sitting in. And it'll mean we can finish the entirety of that Freedom Plaza, as well as create and fund the Virtual Learning Center, which will go into the future and be a constant source of learning. And so that's my presentation for today. I think now we're going to have a video, aren't we? So direct your attention to a short video by the highly regarded producer, Tanya Mason, about our artist, Preston Jackson. Thank you.
There were people escaping, wanting to be free. There's a sophistication. You know, there was a process involved, which was the legal system.
Judges in the 22nd Judicial Circuit voted to create a memorial commemorating enslaved blacks and white lawyers who worked together in the fight for freedom. 60 years before the Civil War, Missouri law allowed slaves to sue for the civil right to be free. 300 enslaved people stood in a court of law and sued for their freedom. These are called the freedom suits.
I was definitely driven by the excitement, you know, and mainly the strength of the subject. That was the main thing, the concept.
Preston Jackson was commissioned to create the memorial statue. It will pay tribute to the brave men and women who stood against their oppressors.
It was so direct, from the steps of where they were auctioned or sold into the courthouses where they sat and listened and were defended. So this was definitely a unique commission, and I went after it.
Jackson is a master artist. He's professor emeritus at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. His studio and art gallery is located in Peoria, Illinois. Jackson is regarded as a storyteller, and his body of work reflects a series of stories. The Freedom Suit statue is just another example of his unique ability. This maquette gives a modest preview of what's to come.
I had to decide whether it was an interior scene or an exterior scene, and that was a very important element. Then I had to make it more personal. Who were some of the people? Well, of all genders, you know, definitely African people from different tribes and places. I wanted to reflect that, and levels of education. So I was looking for the all-inclusive door to go through. Interiors versus exteriors, scenes that happened when they were marched off down to the river, loaded onto boats, and where they were kept before even the trials themselves, in jailhouses and inadequate facilities. So it's like drawing on a canvas. But the canvases, multiple canvases, had to pick up light in a certain way. Something that would excite you and change as the day changed, with the sun moving across the sky.
The designated site for the memorial is the East Plaza of the Civil Courts building.
The actual sculpture itself may be 14.5 to 15 feet tall. Then I'm going to require that it be placed on a 5-foot stone structure, and that will take it up to about 20 feet. This will be my best piece. I say that about a lot of pieces, but this is definitely because of the scale of the piece and located in a place that's hot with culture, hot with spiritual stuff.
Jackson has a personal connection to this memorial. Like the Freedom Suits plaintiffs who fought for equality, as a black man, he has experienced his own struggles.
Black artists don't get very many commissions. And galleries. That's another situation that I divorced. The whole idea of being accepted in galleries. Now here I am, you know, at this age, teaching at the best school in the world, you know, my own department, my own this, and kicking butt all the way, you know. Yet I cannot get a gallery. Yet I cannot get representation. Yet I am pushed out of competition, and it's so obvious why. Sometimes right in my face, sometimes told. So, and this is like, you know, up until the years 2000. And that's why I opened my own gallery.
Regardless of his personal struggles and those of the Freedom Suits litigants, Jackson wants this statue to reinforce a positive message.
I have a choice whether to emphasize the activity, because we know it's negative. It's negative. I mean, there's nothing beautiful about this. But the beauty lies within the sharing of the information. The sharing and telling the truth. Beauty is in truth. Truth is in beauty. So the beauty is in there's someone who cares about you, someone from the white culture that cared about someone from the black culture. That's the beauty of it.